Hi, welcome to Tales of Dread. In this episode we have some true horror stories for you. Our police officers have their own cryptid stories to tell. So enjoy them and don't forget to like, share and subscribe. I've been a police officer in Detroit for a little over 10 years. I've learned that ghosts aren't the most scary things out there. People who are alive are much worse. But one of my first scary things did have to do with the supernatural. It keeps going through my mind. When I went on my first night patrols, I was still a new soldier. I was both nervous and excited to finally have the chance to do something myself to make the country safer and do my part. Yes. I was a typical innocent kid with big plans. I think that being a police officer was the most like being a superhero. I'm smarter now. So, I was in the car with my partner, driving around the neighborhood doing patrols. At 11:35 p.m., it was already getting very late. We hadn't seen anything strange or out of place. So we're kind of getting bored. We parked in a quiet part of the neighborhood and turned on the radio while we watched the hours go by. We were sent somewhere else because someone said they heard strange noises coming from an empty warehouse. My partner seemed to be getting angrier. I was so happy. At last, I had something to do. On one of my first nights out, I was so worried I wouldn't have anything to do. I was ready to look in every room of that warehouse, even if it turned out that the noise was just a family of raccoons. So we told them to find out what was going on. We went a long way into the area. You know that some places in Detroit were pretty much just left to rot. Well, one of those empty spots was where the warehouse was put. Every house for miles around seemed to be getting worse and worse. We began to wonder who would have called about a noise problem in a place where no one seemed to live. When we got there, we parked the car. The warehouse was mostly just a rundown building that was barely standing. Some parts of the roof were gone, most of the windows were just broken pieces, and the walls were dark. Almost everywhere. The doors were so rusty that it looked like they would fall apart as soon as we tried to open them, but that wasn't the only problem. There was a feeling there. I'm not sure how to explain it. My partner and I both thought it was a place you should avoid. After looking at the building, he looked at me and suggested that we both say there was nothing inside to get out. I was very tempted, but I wanted to make sure I could do this job well and be a good officer. It was time to get better. So I said no and suggested that we just take a quick look around in case something was going on inside. Even though I made him roll his eyes, he reluctantly agreed that we should get our guns and flashlights ready. As soon as I got out of the car, I could feel the heat. Since it was early fall, it wasn't really cold. But when we got out of the car, the temperature felt like it had gone up by 20 degrees. My jacket had to stay in the car. My partner took this as another sign that things were going wrong and insisted on leaving. He also had a lot of faith in magic. I only had to look around, but I felt like I had done my job. As we got closer to the factory, the temperature was just going up and up. The closer we got, the hotter it seemed. I began to sweat at this point. It almost felt like the heat was coming from inside the building. When we got to one of the doors, I grabbed the handle to try to open it. As soon as I touched it, the metal felt like it was on fire. I swore and took my hand away right away. When I looked at the handle, even though it felt like it was on fire, everything looked fine. It left tiny burn marks all over my hand, and my partner and I started to get scared. He said it once more. Just leave and call the fire department, is what we should do. We went the other way and are about to go back. When we heard the screams and pounding, my partner and I ran straight to the car. It seemed like dozens of people were desperately pounding on every door in Newell, and there were all kinds of screams and wails coming from inside. But when men came into the picture, my hero complex kicked in. I went right back to where one of the windows was. As I got closer, the screams got louder, and the heat was almost too much to handle. I could feel the fire on my eyelashes. As soon as I was close enough, I looked inside, hoping to find someone or something that was making all the noise. The building was empty. It was just an old warehouse with black and broken up concrete on the floors. I had a bad feeling in the pit of my stomach, so I ran out of there without even turning around. I went to the car where my partner was waiting very patiently. As soon as we got out of the car, we drove away quickly, and my heartbeat finally slowed down. That noise. I could still hear them in my head. They were yelling for help and screaming in pain. No one took us seriously, of course. Back at the fire station, even the firefighters were very upset that they had found nothing. They were sure someone was pulling a joke on them, and they didn't like jokes, especially when they were on them. We've done our time with them, but after that I got very tired of night patrols. Even more so when they happened in places that were empty. After this, gangs and other criminals would hang out in old, run-down buildings. I never saw anything like that again after that. To be honest. Since that night, I haven't been to that part of the city again. I did some research, though, and it looks like it was around 50 years ago. The place used to be a textile factory, but it was destroyed by a huge fire that no one could stop. A lot of people didn't make it out, which is sad. Soon after, the factory was rebuilt from the ground up. I'm sorry. I don't know when it happened. I think the screams we heard were from ghosts who had been hurt by the terrible things that happened. I still don't know if that's really what it was, but whatever it was scared me and makes me feel very sad about everything. I've been a police officer in Houston for a few years, but this is one of the scariest things that has ever happened to me. Before I got married, this happened. At the time, I worked the night shift. Our police station is often small, but the officers here are honest and work hard. At the time, the wife of my partner was expecting. He was with me until 10:30 p.m., when he found out that his wife's water had just broken and she was having contractions. He decided to leave and go home to be with his wife. No one else slept at the station, which was fine because there wasn't much to do there. I was supposed to patrol the block in an hour, but I had to finish some paperwork and make sure everything was in order first. I went outside and finished my patrol. I didn't notice anything that wasn't normal. That's how it was until I was walking back to the station and noticed the flickering lights. The police station always has a backup, so it was strange to see so much flickering in the whole building. That wasn't the strangest thing, though. It was actually a 10-year-old boy holding a teddy bear and standing with his back to me and facing the building. I looked around right away to see who would leave a 10-year-old boy here at 1:25 in the morning. When I was in front of a police station, my instincts kicked in and my mind started to race. Was he left by parents who were having trouble financially or mentally? He might have hurt himself. I called out to him, and I ran toward him. As soon as he turned around, the lights stopped flickering. The boy's hair was brown, and his eyes were bright. I got down on one knee and lightly grabbed his shoulders. I tried to look calm as I looked him over from head to toe, looking for signs that he was hurt anywhere. When I asked him his name, he told me it was Tom. When I asked if he was hurt, he gently shook his head no. I quickly looked around again, but I didn't see anyone else. I gave Tom a pat on the head and told him to come inside. In one of my drawers, I kept a secret stash of chocolates. I like sweets sometimes. I opened it and gave the boy one of the pieces. I asked him what brought him to the station. He was sweating a lot and breathing quickly. It was a lot to worry about. He kept looking to the sides, as if someone or something was going to jump out and attack him. He made a sign for me to come closer, as if he wanted to say something in a whisper. He was young. So I figured, why not? He started to whisper as he looked at his stuffed animal on his lap. He told me that he was friends with 3 people. He played with him before. He called him Ruth, Calvin, and Ruth Drew. I wrote down what he said as he spoke. Tom told me that they had a fight earlier today over something he didn't know about. During the fight, Ruth and Calvin started to fight with each other and hurt Tom's mother. Just recently, Calvin went missing and said he would come after Tom and whoever he called for help. As you might expect, Ruth and Drew helped Tom get to the police station so he could get help for his mother. Even though it was clear that it was a child's story with nothing real in it, I tried to make sense of what he said. I asked him to say how his friends, especially Tom, looked like Calvin. He said he couldn't do that. Even if he told me about them, adults wouldn't be able to see them. When I was sure the kid was just messing around and talking about his own imaginary friends, I put my pen down and asked the boy where his mom was. Tom started crying and told me that he had already told me that she needs help, but I wasn't paying attention. I asked what I could do to help his mom. He told me he would show me how to get to his house. I figured, oh well, that's a good thing. I would help the boy find his way home. So I shook Tom's head and told him to leave. He grabbed my hand and we started walking quickly, with Tom leading the way. We took a few turns and ended up on 48th Street, where Tom ran into a house and told me to hurry up because his mom didn't have that much time left. At the time, I didn't know what to do, but I figured it wouldn't hurt to just check out the house. I thought I could talk to his mother about what he does late at night, and tell her that she needs to stop it. When I walked into the house, the smell of fresh blood hit me like a punch in the gut. I pull out my gun, get in position, and get ready to shoot. I called out my name and told whoever was in there to get out with their hands up. But there was no one there when I heard Tom calling me from far away. I ran to him, and saw that he was bent over a dead woman, who was lying in a pool of her own blood. Tom wasn't crying, but he was begging me to help him with his eyes. I sent the message by radio right then and checked her pulse. She was barely still alive. I called 9112, and the woman was on a stretcher and on her way to the hospital within a few minutes. When help arrived, we searched the house and a nearby area, but we didn't find anything strange. There were no signs of a forced entry, no signs of a fight, or anything else. The back of the woman's head was cut, as if she had fallen and hit her head on something. Still, a shelf couldn't have cut that deep and sharply. We never really found out what went on. The woman got well. She said she didn't really remember much. Tom stuck with his old story, which wasn't very helpful but was very strange. In the Philippines, where I live, I am an officer. I'd like to tell you a story about myself. I live in a small town on the island of Mindanao, where I am stationed. It was a peaceful and quiet place. We got a case that was a little strange. It was about someone seeing something strange near a local cemetery. Most of the time, we have 2 robberies, 1 street fight, and 1 murder every month. But once in a blue moon, a case will involve something supernatural. Now, before the first sighting of the unknown thing, 7 kids between the ages of 5 and 9 have been reported missing in the past few weeks. We don't know what happened to them, except that they mysteriously vanished near the place where the unknown thing was seen. They were part of a family that lived near the cemetery. Kidnappers are well known in the Philippines. In some places, they would take healthy-looking children and sell their organs or give them to child traffickers. We Filipinos are superstitious, and the timing fit with All Souls Day. So the event scared the people in the town a lot. The entity was linked to the missing children, and when word got out, many people thought that this mysterious entity was the one who did it. Many paranormal experts said that the entity was eating the souls of young children, and a lot of people came to the police station and asked for a very active investigation. I was one of the police officers sent to look into that case to show that we pay attention to what people say. And maybe this time we'll find a clue. Who's in charge? The real person who took the child. I don't think all of that is true. Well, I do believe in God a lot, and I am a Christian. Anyway, it was the next morning, 2005, and we were sent to look into what happened. When we got there were a lot of people around the tree next to the cemetery. It was the same thing we had seen nearby, and witnesses said it was a bad spirit. They live in mounds, rocks, and trees. They said that the spirit looked like a spider with long, thin arms, a big, hairy body, 1 eye, no mouth or ears, and a long tail. They say that at night, they try to drag a child into the graveyard. This is where it happened on the night of November 1st, and there aren't many people around. We've already tried to talk to the child, but the parents won't let us because they're set on keeping their kids inside. So, they put salt around it, and anyone who wasn't a family member wasn't allowed to go in. We went to the place where the event took place. We looked everywhere, but we couldn't find any hints. We stayed and looked around. We went back at noon when we still hadn't found anything. Then, at 7 p.m., we got another call saying that the thing had shown up again. So, I and the other officers went there and saw people running around in a panic. So, people went to see the graves of loved ones. People were pushing each other during the event, which led to injuries. When we got to the place where the thing had been seen, people were pointing at an old tree. They say that it was close, but then it went away right away. We took charge of the situation and told everyone to leave the area. Town officials also came because they were told to, and they helped people calm down while me and other officers went in different directions to look for clues. It's possible that this is just a joke. I went toward a place with fewer people or fewer gravestones. It could also be where the person who did it would run. I thought I was carefully moving forward when, out of the corner of my left eye, I saw a shadow. I turned around right away, but there was nothing there. Then I felt something pull on my leg, and I fell forward. Before my face hit the ground, I was able to stop myself with my hands. I was about to stand up when my left foot pulled me quite hard. I could feel something big and rough brushing against my feet. I could feel the texture under the cloth, and it hurt so much. At the time, my heart was beating fast and my mind was a mess. I couldn't say why, but it felt like I was in a sleep paralysis at that moment. I had so much bad energy in my body that I couldn't move. I knew something was wrong. I was aware of what was going on around me, but it felt like something heavy was on my chest. At the time, I knew I had just met the evil. I felt like I was being pulled for a long time, and when I woke up, I was on the ground. I didn't care about what had happened before, so I just stared blankly at the sky. I still remember that I couldn't think of anything at the time. I tried to stay in, but I couldn't. My left foot was again swollen and bruised. I could feel how bad it hurt, but my mind was blank. I sat on the ground like I was stupid after I couldn't stand up. I didn't have to wait long to feel like myself again. I don't remember if I called for help while looking around in a panic and praying out loud after I became aware again. After a while, my coworker came, but I didn't feel safe yet. I wanted to get out of there. Even though many years have passed, I still remember that one night very well. I couldn't do anything. I couldn't look at the cancerous thing. I always thought to myself, maybe that's how the children felt, since there were no signs of a fight. I can't find the words to describe how scary it was. I've already told my story to other people, and some of them believe it and some don't. The missing children have not been found, and no one has been arrested. Also, all of the trees in the cemetery and in the area around it were cut down. No more children were lost. When I was old enough, I went to a police academy to try to make a real difference. I smoked, drank, and slept with both men and women, but when things went wrong, I was the first person people called for help. I like to think that if there is a guy, he has just been playing hooky for the last 100 billion years. I mostly got myself into this mess because I was too nice. I worked the night shift on Saturday, which was also Randy's night shift, just to be clear. Because of my eyesight getting worse, I never should have had to go through all this. I was pretty much taken out of the night shift so that a half-blind cop wouldn't have to chase down a speeding car on a half-lit Kentucky highway. If Randy's wife hadn't gone into labor at the last minute. My faith had never been shaky. You see, I was in the middle of my shift. At this point, my eyes felt like they were full of sand, and my partner, whom I'll call Vanessa, suggested we stop for a coffee. She called me 100 different kinds of old, but I didn't mind. All the while, but before we could pull into the only open place within 6 miles of us. McDee's, of course, the radio started playing status updates and a report of domestic violence. It seems that the neighbors were having a barbecue, and when they went to check on the woman who lived in the house to the left, they heard her screaming bloody murder. Things had stopped moving, and they were left standing at the door with no one to talk to. We got to the neighborhood in record time, and when we got out of the car, our hands were already close to our belts. When the sound stopped reverberating, the door gave way easily. I led the way into the house while holding my breath and trying not to make any noise. I've been to graveyards where there was more life and stillness, and it scared me. People in the area didn't hear any gunshots or slamming, so he must have killed her by strangling her. However, there was no sign that he had done so. What did he say? The dust on the counters and furniture was what made me the most nervous, though. I could pull it in because it was so thick. There was no sign that anyone had been there in months, so it was either set up for the neighbors or they were crazy. Vanessa and I looked through the whole house very carefully for any signs of trouble. And when we didn't find anything, we went back to the front because we were almost done with our shift. At this point, we were too tired to ask for more information. I stopped for a moment when a door to my left opened. We have been so careful to shut every door behind us. As the first thing we learned in police school was to always be on the lookout and aware of your surroundings. Things could go wrong at any time. I thought right away that something was loose in the hinges. Vanessa got scared and reached for her rosary, which she kept in the pocket on her front. She gripped it so hard. It was almost good enough. Almost. Maybe he didn't need to snort. Maybe that thing wouldn't have wasted its time if I hadn't been such a pig about being an atheist. I was, though, so it did. A whisper that made my back go cold seemed to lock up my ear with 4 words that made my whole body go cold. You are on your way to hell. I don't know if Vanessa or I went down the stairs faster, but at some point I dragged her down with me into the open air. When we turned around to look for the neighbors we had left outside, the whole street was now dark. No sign showed that anyone had ever been there. Vanessa took that information with her as she went to the car and told me to think of a reason for that. And to be honest, I still don't have one. After what happened, I have a little more of an open mind, and maybe as time goes on, I'll learn the real truth. Now that I've learned something new, I'm not sure how well I judge things in life. A girl came to our police station to say that someone was following her around her new apartment. At first, we thought the case was easy, but it wasn't what it seemed. 2 weeks ago, she had just moved into her new apartment. It happened when she was trying to find a new place to live. When she looked for one online, there was one place that was ready to move into, but the price was lower than other places in the area. It seemed very odd, since the area was busy and all the other places nearby were much more expensive to rent. Even though she was looking at pictures, she couldn't tell from what she saw. She called the number that was listed below the ad. A broker was the person on the other side. 2 days after that phone call, she went to the building. Taking into account what she said. When the call ended, She used to get blank calls late at night and early in the morning, between 2 and 3 a.m., every night. This went on for 2 days, and when she went back to the building everything seemed fine. But when she got to the apartment on the 3rd floor, she was waiting for the broker to open it. She saw people outside waiting. They talked about something. She was very upset by this. It was an apartment with 1 bedroom, 1 kitchen, 1 bathroom, and a tiny balcony. She saw some trash and dirt, but it was fine other than that. She said there was trash and dirt in the apartment, but it was in the hallway that led to the apartment. After a month, she chose to move in. Then she moved in 15 days later. The people who were helping her move said that the apartment felt cold and creepy that same night when she got off work and went back to her new place. She said she saw shadows moving around. There was a strange darkness in the hallway of her apartment building. When she left her apartment building in the morning the next day, there was also a package with her name on it. She put it inside and went to the office right away. Later, when she went down to the building and back, she looked up at her balcony and had the feeling that someone was watching her as she ran up to her apartment. She had the feeling that someone was nearby. When she got there, the door was cracked open a little. She quickly reached into her bag and took the pepper spray out. But when she looked through the whole apartment, no one was there. When she got home that night, she had ordered food out because her kitchen was still a mess. When her doorbell rang, she got up and went to the door. Before she opened it, she looked through the peephole and saw a man she didn't know standing there. He was dressed in all black, and his face was mostly hidden. When she asked if it was the way the baby was born, she got no answer. He kept knocking on the door and ringing the bell. She didn't open the door. Instead, she stood behind the wall holding a big baseball bat. After a few minutes of this man ringing the doorbell and knocking on the door, he finally stopped after a few minutes of silence. She looked through the hole again, but he was no longer there. All night, her phone kept ringing. It came from someone's personal number. She was afraid that if she picked up the phone, it would be one of those scary shows where the man just breathes into the phone, so she didn't. She turned off her phone and all of the lights in her apartment right away. She could see that the quarter lights were moving, like someone was walking up and down the hallway. She thought it was the same creep who looked through the hole when the doorbell kept ringing, but it turned out to be the delivery person. She was so scared that she just gave him the money behind a closed door and told him to leave the bag there. When she opened the door, there was no one there, so she picked up her food and took it inside for the night, then went by again. But after that night, strange things kept happening, like all of her plants on her balcony getting broken out of the blue, the lights flickering, someone banging on her door and ringing the doorbell at all hours of the night, and the feeling that she was being watched and followed wherever she went. She often said she didn't feel alone in that apartment, and that there was a very unsettling presence. After hearing all of that for ourselves, we checked all of the CCTV cameras in the area, especially the ones around her apartment building, going back to the exact day and time. She said that this happened. We saw her peeking out of her door several times on camera, but nobody was in the hallways or by her door. We did see the delivery guy come by, take the money from under the door, drop off the food, and leave, but no one else, and not in the way she said. We were able to talk to DoorDash, and the delivery person who worked for them about that night. He told a very different story. He told us that he had knocked on the door for about 10 minutes, but no one answered, which I have to say is quite a feat for anyone working for a small online food delivery service. That you'd stay there for 10 minutes knocking on the door and not just drop off the food. That was already odd, but he says that a woman finally opened the door and took the food since it had already been paid for online. She never paid him with cash. If the woman is saying, "I paid, cash me out the door," who is delivering the food? We showed him a picture of the woman, but he said she wasn't the one who ordered the food. And, in fact, we did show him the footage. The person who brought the food wasn't even him. We also showed the delivery person's picture to a woman. She agreed with him, saying it was him. She recognized him right away, but he didn't recognize her. Besides, he said he never saw her. We decided to go back to her apartment once more. Everything looks normal, but the apartment was again unusually cold. They got a strange feeling when they walked in. When asked about it, the woman said that there was a draft coming into the apartment that she couldn't figure out where it was coming from. All the seals on the doors and windows were doing their job, but the draft seemed to be coming from the balcony. After the inspection, nothing was found. We did hear strange tapping in the walls, but nothing that we couldn't put down to probably mice or rats. All the other CCTV footages were fine, and no one was to blame. We told her to call the station again if she ever found herself in a similar situation. We did not hear from her for about 2 weeks. So we had gone to her apartment. It was locked up. We asked the family, who lived next to the apartment, about the woman who had lived there. Both gave each other strange looks. We asked them to tell us anything. They were kind of hesitant at first, but after a lot of talking, they told us something very strange. They said that about 5 years ago, a girl used to live there alone, and that one night, her ex-boyfriend came into the apartment through the balcony, beat her up, and left her there. After 2 weeks, when the apartment started to smell bad, they told the higher-ups, and when they checked, they found her dead. The police caught the man, and he was sentenced to prison. When a beautiful young woman came to rent the same apartment a few weeks later, she moved in and never saw them again. This same thing happened several times after different women moved into that apartment for months at a time and then disappeared. After checking out details about the previous owners, the owner before this woman was a woman in her 40s. When we put all of the photos in front of the delivery person, he chose the one of the woman in her 40s. But, according to everyone who lived in that building, this woman disappeared a few weeks after she moved in. And an old woman who lived near this mysterious apartment said that the people who live there go to a different dimension where they keep living their lives. But we've taken what she said with a grain of salt. Everyone can have their own crazy ideas, as long as they are personal and not related to work. I will say this, though, when you walk into that apartment, you get a crazy, creepy feeling that something is going on. I always wanted to be like my father, who was brave and courageous and always fought against wrong or tried to. He was a police officer, and when I was very young, I decided that I would follow in his footsteps and carry a real weapon everywhere. You know the fantasy of beating up bad guys and crooks. Maybe it wasn't my dad who made me want to be a police officer. Maybe it was the action movies we used to watch together, like Die Hard and other movies like that. Anyway, fast forward a few years, and I'm now 22 and a newly hired rookie officer patrolling near Emily Bridge in Vermont. It was a very popular tourist spot, but not because of its beauty but because of a scary urban legend about it. This 50-foot-long bridge is said to be where a young woman killed herself in the middle of the 1800s. According to a story, Emily was supposed to meet her lover at the bridge to run away. But when he didn't show up, she ended up hanging herself from the rafters. People now think that Emily's ghost scratches at cars and sometimes just appears in front of people in her horrifying evil form. I don't believe in such superstitions and tales. People have died by suicide in many places. How come their ghosts don't haunt the entire world? So it was a Saturday morning, the time of my duty, and I was near the bridge. I was out on patrol with my partner, a 39-year-old officer whose name I won't say but who had 20 years of experience and a lot of stories about how he saved the world. So far as I can tell, he's so talkative. My head hurt from listening to him over and over. I tried to get rid of them by playing Grease 2 in my head and eating my roll, which I had bought as street food while patrolling is the best. My partner also had a roll, but God forbid he eat quietly and stop talking. He's a narcissist and so self-centered. During one of his unusually long stories about how he saved a woman from being kidnapped, he talks with a full mouth. We heard a sharp scream. It sounded like a woman was screaming, but what scared me the most was that I could hear pure fear in her voice. We quickly got ready and walked toward the sound of the scream, which was apparently coming from under the Emily Bridge. As soon as we got there, I saw something that I probably won't be able to forget, a man lying on the ground, moaning in pain as his back bled and a pool of blood formed under him, while a woman was being strangled by a white shimmery thing. When my partner and I stopped, the white thing stopped strangling the woman and turned around. It was a ghost. A ghost of a woman, probably Emily from the legend. It stopped and vanished. It gave us this creepy cackle and then quickly disappeared. We stood there shaking for a moment, because what on earth? But then he went toward the scared couple who were lying on the ground. I looked to see if the man was on the ground while my partner checked on the quietly crying woman. Thankfully, the woman wasn't hurt, so I asked my partner to help me pick up the man and get out from under the bridge quickly, in case the Emily ghost came back. How could this be able to happen? Even guns would have no effect on a ghost. After I got off the bridge, I put the man in the back seat of my car and took out my first aid kit. When my partner called an ambulance, the woman cried. She was scared and asked if her boyfriend would be all right. He was bleeding out badly. My partner tried to comfort her, but she just couldn't stop crying. It was terrifying to be attacked. I wouldn't blame her too much for crying. I would have done it too. We tried to ask her what happened, but she couldn't talk enough to tell us what happened. When the ambulance came, we put the couple in it and sent them on their way to the hospital. We basically told our story to our boss. He laughed in our faces and didn't believe me at first, not even my more experienced partner, but luckily we had our cameras with us and had recorded the whole thing. Even though the ghost of Emily couldn't be seen in the recording, which is creepy. We could see the man who was bleeding and the being who was just flying in the air while holding her neck where the ghost's hands had been. Our boss was very quiet, and he asked us to follow up with a couple and ask them about what happened there to make sure their stories matched up. We waited until the next day before checking on them. Obviously, you need some time to accept what happened and get out of this traumatized state. The next morning, we left for the hospital where the couple was staying. We asked how they were doing and if they were feeling better. Physically, they were, but emotionally, they were still dealing with the effects of what happened. After asking what happened under the bridge, the woman told us that they were just making out when this thing showed up. This white ghostly figure formed around her boyfriend and tried to throw him off the bridge. When she attacked him, he fought back, which stopped him and her from leaving. I don't know when the woman tried to save her boyfriend by dragging him away and throwing him off the bridge. This thing began to choke this girl. It's completely weird, right? While this thing was choking her, we came along and saved their lives. She thanked us a lot and suggested that we close the underside of the bridge. It's safe to say I didn't expect this to happen when I applied to be an officer. I know this probably sounds like a cheesy creepy story, but I promise you, there are things that happen on the job that are much scarier and harder to explain. And stories like this one get hidden from the public far more often than you could ever imagine. I started my night shift around 4, so in the morning there was nothing out of the ordinary. I saw burglars and thieves, and sometimes we had to break up fights between teenagers. So I was in my patrol car, when I suddenly saw a strange shadow. I'll explain it to you as best I can. It was tall, and its arms and legs were unusually long, but shadows just get warped. It's a game of lights, and the street lamps will make things look weird, especially at this time of night. Everything was too quiet, and I may have been distracted. I look for the source of the movement. Don't ask me why, but for some reason I thought it was a male. I just knew it. The truth was that I didn't see anything because the corner of a building blocked my view and I couldn't find the source. So I just moved the car toward it. I only found an empty street. Mind you, I'm a 32-year-old woman and have been a police officer for more than 10 years. At this point, I don't get scared easily. I've seen it all, and even less of what people say is supernatural. I don't believe in either of those things. And to this day, the only real horrors are the ones that real people can't do. Some ethereal thing is moving to do God knows what to us. If anything, people around me have told me I'm too cold. The truth is that I'm not the most expressive person to be around, which sometimes just scares people. Well, this shadow keeps getting bigger and bigger. It was in the shape of a person, but it was very twisted. It looked too tall to be a person, but lights often make us see weird things. Then it slowly got closer, and I could see how it moved its legs in a weird way. They got twisted as it moved. I start to look behind me, and at the signs. I remember hearing a street dog whimpering and feeling a deep sense of dread. It was completely illogical. I know that the hairs on the back of my neck stood up and that a horrible chill went down my spine. The dog in the distance kept whimpering, making me feel sad. I think it was something that made me get out of the car, open the door, and get it inside. Oh man! The feeling I had of being weak was awful. I moved quickly and tried to see more of what was around me, but there was nothing to see, even though my training didn't let me see what was there. The dog kept making sad sounds. I started the car and drove right out of that horrible street. The station workers didn't tell me anything about the dog. We left it there until I left for work in the morning, and animal control took care of it. I held on to it for 5 years. In fact, I had to go to animal control to get it. It was a woman who died of old age. I called her Hope Man, and nothing supernatural happened to me again. But I still remember that night and how cold it made me feel. The way I looked like a shadow made me think of something from Slender Man. You know, that whole Gen Z thing with creepypasta so far. I don't know if what happened was supernatural or not. I'd like to think it wasn't, but I and this dog both felt like something was out there getting closer to us. In any case, no matter what you think, it was creepy. My dad was a police officer in a small town in Montana. Nothing that really stands out. Just burglars, kids pulling pranks, and stuff about domestic violence. Yes, that was just the way things are. As my siblings and I got older, we learned a lot about people and our neighbors that was pretty scary. Some people are just bad, and you can't explain why. My dad is a man who doesn't like to waste time. He is also an atheist and has a lot of doubts about things like the supernatural, especially since most of the weird things that have happened to him have been real people or animals. But he never got to the bottom of one thing. We grew up in a town with a lot of empty houses. Things were better in my town in the past. Some pretty nice buildings were left to fall apart. Kids would play urban exploration, and there were a few emergencies because of drug dealers and gangs. Most of the calls came from scared neighbors or people who saw strange things. One night, a kid and an old woman saw a witch man dancing to a fire in the backyard, and my father was sent with a partner to an abandoned place to investigate. He must have thought it was either a drug dealer or something to do with a gang. It couldn't stay. The worst thing is that they can only find local kids making a bonfire, so they would have to stop them and make them put out the fire before things got out of hand. So, they met a bunch of neighbors who were upset about the noise and lights, and everyone kept talking about the witch man. The man who is with my father says he saw someone move on the floor above. So, they went to the house, knocked, and said who they were. No one answered, so they just went inside. Once inside, they said the prank was successful and fun, but it was time to stop. The neighbors are done with it. They start to record the place room by room, but all they find is old stuff that isn't worth much. It must have been stolen. Same thing on the second floor, but my dad and his partner start to feel nervous, as if they were being watched, but they didn't see anyone and there weren't really many places to hide. At the end, both my dad and his partner saw an orange light of fire outside. But when they looked through the window, no one was there. When they talked to the police station on the radio, all they heard were more complaints about the noise. Both went around the garden, but they didn't see anything. They told their worried neighbors this. When they got to the station, that's when they saw the people, and they were looking at them funny. A woman from admin showed them later that it had an audio recording in it. On the neighbors' complaints, you could hear my dad and his co-worker talking about what they saw. In the background, you could hear an angry man with a deep, raspy voice yelling. The sounds were broken and strange, but it seemed to say, "Get out, this is my place." They got a few more calls about emergencies. No one ever found anything that was really important. Even though my father still doesn't believe in God, he still gets a little scared when he thinks about that event. It's been 30 years since I became a police officer. It's not always easy, but it's a job, so I expect it to be hard sometimes. I've always felt like I could handle it, though. One time only? Have I ever thought about giving up? And then something unbelievable happened to me. My mind and common sense have always kept me from going crazy, no matter what was going on in my life. I am a reasonable person. I never thought ghosts or anything supernatural existed. I'm sure that people who make up these stories and then believe them are really crazy. I'm also mostly an atheist and have been for most of my life. However, after the things I'm about to tell you, I really started to believe in God. I'm now 100% sure that God exists, or at least that there is some kind of higher power out there that is in charge of everything behind the scenes. I want to tell you about myself. I was working at the office one day when I was asked to check on a house. Some people walking by said they saw something inside, and they were worried about a few squatters making trouble. Everyone knows that the house I was supposed to look at hadn't been lived in for at least 10 years. It is on top of a small hill in a small area. From the last house on the street, it only takes about 20 minutes to drive there. It sounds creepy, but it's not. It's just a building that was never finished, and squatters often have trouble there. We've also had to deal with a lot of drug deals in that area. It has very modern architecture and was built a long time before its time. The road that leads up to it is long, and the front yard is very big and not very well kept. I'll never understand why they built the house right there and then just let it fall apart. I think it might have been that the owner had killed himself or something. I can't think of anything else, but I always wonder why the house was never broken into. Yes, there have been drug problems there, like drug deals and even some minor gang activity. There have also been squatters, but I don't think any teenagers have broken in and spray-painted anything. But after having been there several times, the whole place feels very strange. Like an unwelcoming vibe. So, when I was called to the house, I knew I wouldn't find anyone there. The kids were probably drunk or affected by a scary movie they had just seen, making them think there was someone in the house, or they were really seeing squatters. My job was to go check it out and tell them if anything was really wrong. I had that strange feeling again as I got closer to the front yard of the house. Something was going to happen that made me feel like I should turn around and lie about even going to the house. I didn't care, though, because I knew nothing would come of it. As I got closer to the house, I could hear how quiet it was. It was eerily quiet, and the outside of the house was still nice. I got out of my car and started looking around to see if there were any signs of people breaking in or squatting. I saw nothing. I thought everything was fine. I started to go back, but then I saw that the front door was wide open. It was not something I had seen right away. I walked up the long driveway to the steps because I was too busy looking at the sides of the house when I pulled up. The house smelled very stinky and musty. I could only hear my own breathing in the empty hallway. I went into the first room on the left, which was also empty and was the kitchen. It took me a few minutes to look through the whole house and see that no one was there. As I had thought, I went downstairs to try to lock the door. It was opened by something going down the stairs, maybe the wind. I looked down the hallway and saw a woman standing in the middle and staring at me. She wore only black clothes and looked very sick. I asked her what was wrong and how she ended up in that situation. I didn't hear anyone else walk or drive up to the house. I made sure of everything, as I said earlier, just a few minutes ago. The woman didn't answer my question or any of my other questions, like who she was, what she was doing in the house, or if she knew she was breaking the law by being there. None of those questions were answered by her. I started to move toward her. I told her to raise her arms over her head. I was going to take her to the police station to ask her questions. But as I said, she began running at me. When I saw how her face had changed, I jumped. There was a scary madness in her eyes that made me think she was going to attack me. If she did, I didn't know what she would do. So, I shot her in the chest. At that exact moment, she stopped looking at me and vanished into the chaos. She looks just sad and alone. She landed on the floor. I could not let her die. I called for help and ran over to her. That night, The only thing she said to me was why I didn't know what to say. She closed her eyes, and I could feel her heartbeat slowing down. It was too late. I couldn't stand the thought of killing her. Until the ambulance came, at least. I sat by her body and tried to figure everything out. After. True. When I was in the worst pain of my life, she started to breathe again. I have no idea what I had to do to clear my mind. They called me from the hospital a few days after that. She had been trying to reach me. She told me something that made me think she was on the other side, dead, but okay and about to go into the light. When a man told her she shouldn't do that, she stopped. She needs to return. So she did. So, she's still alive. She doesn't exist, though. This person has never been seen alive or born, and she has no idea who she is, where she came from, or what she was doing in that house that day. Still, it's strange and scary that she knows very personal things about my life. And said that it was fate that I was called there that night. She knows things about my family and my childhood that only me, my family, and a few close friends could know. She was given a polygraph test, and the truth is that she has no idea who she is or what happened to her in the past. But she says she knows everything about me, including who I am and why we were meant to be together. I feel like life has really thrown me a wild card, and it would really help if I could get some closure from your opinions to give you some background before I tell you my story. I'm from France and I used to work as a police officer. So that's where everything happens. I stopped working there about 5 years ago. At the time, my mother's health was getting worse quickly, and I needed more time to care for her. My mother died not even a year later. But I still haven't gone back to the job. I don't have any plans to go back. Partly because I'm about to tell you about some strange things. I went out with someone one night, but we weren't the best of friends. I thought he was too pushy and rude with other people. He didn't seem like the kind of person you'd want in charge. I'm saying that he was a jerk who thought he was better than everyone else and took advantage of his power whenever he could. No one liked working with him very much. He was sexist, racist, very homophobic, and a narcissist, to name a few bad traits. Think about how he was around me. I knew he didn't like me. It says that my choices in life are disgusting more than once. I know this sounds weird, but I think everything he said was either questionable or just bad. His glass would sometimes fall off the table and break. Sometimes it was his car alarm going off, and other times it was random noises like people screaming around him. We heard random gunshots right next to us once when we were looking into a robbery, and he couldn't help but say bad things about the black woman and her child who lived there. I'm not sure how to explain it. It seems like something was following him and picking on him. He didn't care at all, though, and acted like we were just making things up. He could not have missed it. It wasn't karma, something bad, like an entity, did it. I knew it made us all feel awkward and a little scared in some way. It was weird, and the one night I worked with him was the most confusing night of my life. He was very angry that night, and she made sure to show it to me the whole time we worked. He kept talking trash about his family, his neighbors, and our co-workers right in front of me. I did my best to not pay attention to him, but it got out of hand. He was getting on my nerves more and more as the night went on. There were a few little things that happened. Some of them were small and not too scary, but others really scared me. The first thing that happened in the car was that there was a lot of static on the radio. He turned it down and kept driving as though nothing was strange. During one of his annoying rants, his coffee cup flew toward him after being in the cup holder for a while. I was scared by this one. It couldn't have fallen out of the cup holder, that's clear. It was pretty much thrown at him again. He didn't seem to care at all, and after that he kept talking. For a while, it was quiet, and there weren't that many people on the streets, so the shift was more calm. But after that, everything went downhill and got a lot worse. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw something run from the side of the road right in front of our car. We hit the brakes, and before he could stop, you could feel that we had hit it. I thought I saw a black cat. So I thought we must have killed it. I didn't expect him to brake. I didn't think he would care about that because of who he is. For something like that, you'd almost expect him to drive faster. We both got out of the car to see what had happened, but there was nothing there. I thought we had hit an animal, so I was surprised. We both did, and he was just as confused as I was. He said that the animal had probably been able to get away from the car, and that maybe we had just hit something else. Nothing about this made any sense. We got in the car again. Both of us were very quiet. After a few minutes, my partner puts on the brakes and gets out of the car. I almost flew out of my seat. Out of the blue. We stopped, and I asked him what was going on. He seems afraid. He had never acted like this before. So it made me worry. He told me that he saw a light behind the car while we were driving. So he looks in the rearview mirror and is scared by what he sees. In the car's back seat. He said that the woman was dressed in all black. She looked at him straight in the eyes. He said. He stopped the car right away, but when he turned around to look at her, she was gone. I could tell he was very upset. As soon as he said this, I caught a glimpse of someone standing on the other side of the road. I quickly turned around to see what was there. Then they were gone. I can't tell you how uncomfortable it made me feel to see that he was just as scared as I was. Up until this point, he had ignored everything, but he couldn't ignore what we had seen that night. We didn't talk about it after a few days of him being quieter and after we thought it would have changed him. He went back to what he used to do. I've been a police officer in our small town for as long as I can remember, but I've never been through anything like what happened to me last week. I don't believe in ghosts or anything else like that. I never have. But the logic I've been raised to apply cannot begin to explain this. I've never seen anything so strange, and I don't know if anyone else has either. You see, there's no way to explain it or even make it sound like it makes sense. But please be patient, because I need to tell you the story that made me think differently about my life. At about 8 p.m. we had heard from dispatch that a fight was going on between two college students. It seems like it started as a small argument and quickly turned into a full-blown fight. It took about an hour to get to the scene. Even if we drove like we were in a NASCAR race, it was right on the edge of our jurisdiction. So I was sure that we were going to be plenty late to the party. We were the only unit that was available at the time. So we got moving. This is exactly why people think cops are rude, because they are always late. You know that the nearby units are always doing something. Gene, my co-worker, and I were driving. I sat next to him and looked out the window while my stomach growled. Work kept me from eating lunch that day, and I'm not the kind of person who can go a long time without eating. At about 8:30, we were still a long way from where we were going. We stopped at a sandwich place with a drive-through that was near us. We were already going to be late, so we took a short break. Couldn't hurt at all. I wouldn't have been surprised if the fight was already over and everyone had just gone home or to the hospital or wherever. Jean started driving again as I took the wrapper off my sandwich. Even though I told him to get something to eat while he had the chance, he only bought an iced coffee. He had been with me, and neither of us had eaten lunch yet. I thought he wasn't hungry. Anyhow, every place. Again, the road was empty, and there was no one on it. On either side of the road, there were lots of trees, but no people. It was pretty quiet, except for what happened next. Around 8:50, I saw something strange that wasn't normal. Even though the road had been straight the whole time, we still managed to pass the sandwich shop where we had bought our food. Again, I told Jean about this, and she stopped and looked. Yes. We had been going straight for 20 minutes on a straight road, but now we were in a circle. The sandwich shop was the same one. If he doesn't know how to get there, I told him to put it on his GPS. He did it reluctantly, but he swore that he had been on this road many times and was sure he knew how to get there. We left the shop once more and went on with our trip. This time, I was more aware of what was going on outside. So when the long, tree-lined road opened up to show the same shop, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Jean also saw it and pulled over to check his GPS, which confirmed that we were back at the same place. I couldn't figure it out, even though I had driven on this road before and knew it wasn't a circle. Something wasn't right. I told him, "Please let me drive now," as he mumbled in confusion. It was already 9:10 p.m., and he kept going back to the same place. This wasn't helping us. I started driving while carefully looking at the GPS on his phone in front of me. I also paid attention to the road in front of me just as much as I did to the GPS route, which showed me a straight path to the destination. We found ourselves back at the shop. I started to worry about what was going on. I looked at Jean, who looked just as upset as I did. I couldn't just tell dispatch that we were in some kind of time warp by radio. They think we're on drugs or that we're drunk. So I had to come up with an idea. I got out of my car and went to talk to the shop's owner. He was an older man in his late 60s. In fact, it was the same man who gave me the sandwich. I told him about the strange thing that was happening to us and asked him if anyone else had ever seen it. He had trouble hearing, so I had to say things over and over again and raise my voice. When he finally got what I was saying, he just shook his head and looked confused. I was sad and walked back. The conversation didn't go anywhere, so we drove off again, promising that if the roads somehow led us back to the shop, I'd finally call for the help we needed. Keep in mind that both Jean and I were pretty creeped out at this point. But the tree-lined road went on for longer and didn't lead us back to where we started. When I saw that the road we were on led to other roads, I breathed a sigh of relief I had never felt before. We got to our destination at 9:50 p.m., and didn't see anyone, but I didn't really care. We had been driving in a circle on a straight road for more than an hour, and I told them that I had plenty of time. As Jean talked to dispatch, I changed the station's location in the GPS so we wouldn't have to take the same route. As an officer, there was no way in hell I was going to go through that again. I've seen a lot of strange things, but I've always been able to make sense of them with logic and reason. This includes strange animals, strange shapes, the paranormal, and people who are possessed. Drug users, fights with guns, you name it. People don't make sense. But something like this makes us feel like we're in the bathroom. I'm not sure how to explain this. I have looked into this before, and the only thing that comes up is the Mandela effect, which might or might not be what I went through. In any case, I still find it hard to believe and accept that it really happened. Both the GPS and my memory show that the way we were going was straight. Still, we kept going through the same thing. Discuss the Twilight Zone. Tell me your thoughts. I'd love to hear what you think happened. Since I was a little boy, I wanted to be a police officer. Every Halloween I can remember, I've dressed up as one. I never liked any other job. This is probably because my father was a more well-known LAPD officer. And the person I look up to in everything I do. As soon as I finished high school, I tried to join the police academy. I was accepted, and I recently started my training. I just had a party to mark 10 years since I got my gun and badge. I have enjoyed every second of my job. Thank you to my dad. I've met a lot of strange, dangerous, and crazy people, but I've never been afraid. Every time I saw them, it made me want to protect and help them even more. So, the only time I've ever really felt afraid was when I saw something that wasn't a person. I still don't know how to explain it. Today. It happened in August. My partner and I were in the car when we got a call from a nearby address over the radio. A man calls 911 to say that someone broke into his house. We ran as fast as we could to the address and got to the front door. There were no signs that someone had broken in, but the door was wide open. So he went inside slowly and started looking around. After a few minutes, we had cleared all but one room, and the door to that room was locked. We told the owner of the house that we were police, and he opened the door as he came out of the bathroom holding a knife. When he saw us, he looked relieved and put the gun down. He said that he lives there by himself and that he heard a door open and close just before he ran into the bathroom to hide. We could not really do much to help. We looked for shoe prints, tracks, or fingerprints, but we didn't find anything. No one showed any sign of coming in. We told him to lock the door and call us if anything happened or if he saw anything. We were going to go back that night. The same man called again from the same address, saying that someone was trying to break into the bathroom door from inside the house. He really meant it and looked worried when he sent it. We had to break in this time because the front door was locked. But when we looked inside the house again, we didn't find anyone. There are also no signs that someone broke in. When the man came out of the bathroom, he was pale and looked rather terrified. After we talked to him again, my partner and I went outside to talk about what had happened. We were sure that no one else could have been in the house, but we all agreed that he doesn't seem to be making things up, going crazy, or having hallucinations. He was like any other 40-year-old. We came to the conclusion that he might be crazy, though. So, we decided to look through his medical records to find out more about his past. There might have been a chance of mental illness. We didn't find anything that would support this idea, but we did find something very strange. About a week before, this man had said that his wife was missing. Still, the police hadn't found her. I asked around a bit, but I didn't find out much. Something didn't seem right. That night, I couldn't sleep because I was worried about everything. We looked at a lot of records and found, over time, that he didn't try to get in touch with the police or do anything else about his wife after he reported her missing. He had more and more doubts about what was going on. So I went to his house one night to see if I could find out anything. I left my own car nearby and waited until about midnight. Again, someone called the police. It was the same man saying that there was someone inside. I've been outside his house for a couple of hours now, and I know for sure that no one went in or out after the call. I could make out the shape of a person walking around the house. I contacted a dispatcher. He said he was in the bathroom to hide. I had no idea what was going on and was completely confused, so I went inside by myself instead of waiting for help. I was sure that someone was going to come in, I opened the door by picking the lock and sneaking in slowly. I could hear someone knocking on the bathroom door. When I got closer, there was no one there, and all I could hear was a man crying in the bathroom. I got him to come out, and then we sat down and talked. I told him that I think something is going on and that he should talk to someone about his wife. As soon as I said her name, he looked and acted very differently. He didn't look sad, but he did look a little worried, and he said that she'd been gone for a while. He didn't hear anything from the police about what was going on. There was something wrong with the whole thing, but I can't put my finger on it. Not yet. We had reached the end of our talk. I told them I would come back to ask more questions, and then I started to leave. He still sits on the couch. I was about to leave when I heard footsteps behind me. When I turned around, I thought he was following me, but he wasn't there. I saw instead a person in a white dress coming toward him. I took out my gun and pointed it slowly at the person. The man let out a horrifying scream when he saw the silhouette too. At first, after the scream, I could hear him mumbling something about how hard it was and how sorry he was. He was yelling, "I'm sorry." I had no idea what was going on. Then things got even stranger and more strange. The person in the white dress grabbed the man by the throat and started to choke him. I started to yell at it to stop, but it didn't pay attention. I shot at the shoulder, but the bullet went right through it. Now I'm scared and don't know what to do. So, I shot 3 more rounds without thinking, and all of them went straight through. I ran at the person or thing to grab it, went through it, and then ran into the wall. What had happened was so hard for me to understand. I looked up. It was clear that the figure was a woman. Her face was blank, and she didn't say anything. She stood there and choked the man in front of me. I wasn't able to do anything. I called for help on my radio, but the man on the sofa had already passed out by the time help arrived. The woman in the white dress let go of his body, and started walking away toward the yard. I got up to check the man's heart rate. He wasn't taking in air. He was no more. So I decided to go after her. She slowly walked toward the tree in the garden without making a sound, and then she was gone. I saw dirt under the tree when I got to it. That it wasn't like anything else in the garden. I started digging with nothing but my hands. After a while, the smell got so bad that I dug even faster and soon found a dead body. To be even clearer, the skin was already breaking down, and half of the meat had been eaten. When the paramedics got to the man, they checked him out. After I found it, I could see my pile of puke right next to it. Asphyxiation was thought to be the cause of death, but there were no visible signs that someone had strangled him. The only thing the paramedics could figure out was that he had stopped breathing, but I know what happened. I don't know how it's possible, but I'm sure the ghost of his dead wife is there. I sound so silly just typing this. But the ghost of his wife, who had died and been buried in the yard, came back and hurt the rest of the police and doctors. No one will ever know how this man died. I will not say what I saw. I would lose my badge and be sent to a place for crazy people. No one would take me seriously. But after this, I think ghosts and other strange things are very, very real. I wanted to be a police officer like my dad and his father before him. It was kind of a family trait. So it was even more special for me to ride in the back seat of my partner's police car. It was my first night, and my partner kept making fun of me, picking on me, and calling me a rookie, but I didn't mind. I knew a lot about how hazing was done. The night was dull. My partner asked me a lot of different questions to try to break the silence. Aside from that, it was quiet. There wasn't much going on. We looked around for someone to catch, but so far we hadn't found anyone. It wasn't much of a first day, so we kept driving until I saw a person standing on the corner. I asked my partner, "Do you see something?" I pointed to the figure, which I can now see was a taller man standing with his head down. She looked around for a while before shaking her head and deciding that it was probably just a homeless man. We got in the car and drove away. As we passed, I looked out the window, he turned his head, and we both watched as we drove away. I thought it was strange, but we don't have to do anything about it now. When we heard on the radio that 51 to 50 was on South and Boulevard, we kept driving. My partner took the radio, and let them know we were on our way. I remember a little bit about the 51 to 50 from training. It had to do with the crazy people. We turned and got there faster and in less time than I thought. We drove up to the house and land they had told us about over the radio, loaded our weapons, and got out of the car.